Hi, we're here today to talk about our research proposal for contemporary issues in accounting. My name's Catherine.
My name is Rudra.
I'm Xiaomi.
My name's Tom.
CSR focuses particularly on the conduct of corporations and whether corporations owe a duty to stakeholders other than shareholders. The World Business Council defines CSR as the commitment of businesses to contribute to sustainable economic development, working with employees, their families, the local community and society at large to improve quality of life. With access to information and the media enabling the public to be more informed and easily monitor corporate activities, consumers and investors are demonstrating an increased interest in supporting responsible business practices. However, this comes with a higher demand of information as to how companies address risks and opportunities relating to social and environmental issues. CSR has been largely debated over decades, with the central point of discussion on CSR revolving around the conduct of multinational corporations and other large private companies. This is primarily due to their size, and this allows them the ability to significantly influence domestic and international policy and the communities in which they operate. A predominant theory that has surfaced from this debate is the legitimacy gap theory. Legitimacy gaps can threaten an organization's image and reputation, and ultimately its existence as a legitimate member of the business community and society. With this in mind, the traditional philosophy of maximizing shareholder value without regards to stakeholders has become an outdated notion in today's global environment. CSR practices are shown to enhance shareholder value, with evidence indicating that those businesses who produce more voluntary unregulated disclosures to meet the needs of stakeholders had a lower drop in share prices. Although research has found CSR to primarily be beneficial to corporations, studies have also found negative effects on businesses by implementing CSR. According to previous research, adding sustainability attributes improves consumer perception of quality in some categories but diminishes those perceptions in others. Thus, the motivation of this proposed study is to analyse the effectiveness of CSR and the value Australians place on CSR in companies when it comes to not only shareholders but all stakeholders in the business compared to international norms.
The fundamental aim of this research is to identify the importance of social contracts that are complied with by publicly listed organisations in which the Australian society places significant values on based on the legitimacy theory of unregulated disclosures. Additionally, to provide further academic understanding on how societies around the globe respond to corporate social responsibility crisis, this proposal will also look into critically analysing and comparing these values on an international scale. This study will seek to answer the question, does Australian organisations believe that unregulated CSR disclosures are a worthwhile investment in order to improve legitimacy, and organisations in turn would gain an increase in profitability and capital investment. Next, I'll talk about the theory. Reviewing relevant literature has shown that the researcher applies the legitimacy theory as the base of the theoretical framework in order to identify the importance of the social contract placed on companies by society. Legitimacy theory can be defined as a concept in which an entity theoretically has to ensure that society they operate in is comfortable with the values and norms of the entity and is equivalent to the values perceived by the society in how an entity should act. Legitimacy theory is fit for the study as the aim of the research proposal is to explore the implicit terms of the social contract. Legitimacy theory provides guidance on whether the organisational disclosures are able to influence the acceptance of society. Essentially, the implied contract between society and organisation can be defined as the social contract, which is the permission granted by the society to the organisation to function and conduct its business in compliance with the expectations of society. Legitimacy theory focuses on organisation fulfilling the expectations of society and prevent it from losing its social position. The benefits gained by the organisation are expected to exceed the costs that are drawn from the community resource. This proposal notions that while there is an undisputed commitment of accounting for social and environmental activities of organisations, it is not so much an obligation, but more so an obedience. One research stated that organisations are observed to obey the social contract due to certain political motivation, or just instrumental whys and wherefores for doing so, such as self-interest. This study believes that, according to legitimacy theory, publicly listed companies in Australia who abide by the rules of social contract are perceived as having higher value by society.
Through a literature review, previous studies have shown that unregulated disclosures on a financial statement are an investment on behalf of a company, not an expense. There are three interrelated theories of why companies do these unregulated disclosures. The first theory is the stakeholder theory, the second one is the legitimacy theory, and the third one is the institutional theory. For the purposes of our research proposal, we will be focusing on the legitimacy theory. Previous literature seeks to explain how the legitimacy theory is about organisations which go to effort to meet societal norms and remain legitimate within society. Within the social contract, there are both implicit and explicit terms. An organisation is required to meet these terms in order to gain, maintain and retain legitimacy in society. The scope of our proposal will focus on the implicit terms placed within the social contract for organisations which operate in Australia and on an international scale. Previous studies show that common implicit terms within the social contract include child labour, work health and safety, worker remuneration and environmental awareness. Organisations which operate in hazardous industries and organisations with a large amount of operations in foreign nations are at a higher risk of not meeting the terms placed within the social contract. Implicit terms within the social contract are notoriously difficult to determine. This is due to their dynamic nature as they change as society evolves. For example, 30 years ago climate change didn't exist. Now it's a prevalent issue which organisations produce a lot of unregulated disclosures to try and meet societal norms and their implicit terms in order to operate in Australia and on an international scale. A recent study has taken the top 5 international mining companies which operate in Australia and taken a look at their annual statements. They found that there's a greater amount of unregulated disclosures for all the mining companies, and they sort of overcompensate to meet societal norms and remain legitimate and hold the social licence to operate within Australia. Another recent study undertaken shows that after a major CSR crisis has occurred, companies in which produced a greater number of unregulated disclosures to meet societal norms have suffered less of an impact in terms of their share price compared to companies which have produced less unregulated disclosures. Linking this shows that companies and society value unregulated disclosures on the financial report. The overarching result of performing a literature review is that the legitimacy theory and the social contract are extremely important in order to maintain the social license to operate within a country. Societal norms are ever changing, and implicit and explicit terms will need to be met for a company to keep operating.
The research methodology which our research seeks to adopt is a positive theory study approach. Through a positive theory study approach, we will examine whether disclosures made by companies are due to social pressures or whether they make additional disclosures because they are morally motivated to seem legitimate and adhere to societal norms. In order to determine whether organisations adopt the positive theory approach, secondary data, namely annual reports, standalone social and environmental reports from companies listed on the Australian Stock Exchange will be analysed. The expected outcome of the research is to determine whether the quantity of disclosures within a company will increase over a period of time if an organisation is involved in an event that causes some sort of environmental damage that is deemed unacceptable by society. It is also expected to determine whether additional voluntary disclosures are made post-incident due to the belief that they are able to retain positive social contract with society and remain legitimate. This action is hypothesized to redirect attention away from the negative impact of the company's actions. Academics would be able to utilize the research on implicit terms within the social contract in order to develop further understanding on unregulated disclosures and the relationship between Australian organisations and society. However, the limitations which could be faced with the research is the inconsistencies of CSR reporting amongst various companies which may obscure information which is analysed. Future studies may therefore seek to examine social cultural variables which range across different countries as a factor which may influence the various reporting variances and reporting methods. This will assist academics to further understand different organisational CSR reporting disclosures and the different emphasis placed on certain values and attitudes towards CSR between society and organisations internationally as well as domestically in Australia. In addition to this, future studies may also need to consider the economic development of countries examined as a factor which may help to further understand the differences in CSR reporting between developing and developed countries.
Through the review of previous studies, all operating organisations have social responsibilities as their activities impact the well-being of society, the external environment, and the perception of value placed on a company. Legitimacy theory will therefore be the basis of the research proposal to determine whether organisational disclosures are able to influence the acceptance of society through analysing secondary data.